Hey, Math 3. So I just want to make sure that we all remember the formulas surrounding exponential functions so that when we move into our application problems tomorrow in class, we'll all be ready. So the first exponential function you saw was probably in Math 1, and it looked like this: y equals a, b to the x. So that a value is known as the initial. It is sort of the y-intercept, because remember that initial is when x is 0. So that's the y-intercept. B is the growth or decay factor. So this is the growth or decay factor. So we're going to expand on that tomorrow, but when b is greater than 1, that is when we're going to have an exponential growth. So you might remember seeing the equations go like that, or the graphs go like that. When b is less than 1, but it's going to be greater than 0, because we're not going to have negative factors, that's a decay, and your graph would look like that. So then you most likely moved on to exponential growth versus exponential decay. So notice the big difference here is that in a growth, you are going to add the r, and in a decay, you are subtracting the r. So that a, which you might have also seen as a p there, which we will see in our functions below, but that a is just that initial. Sometimes you'll see it as the principal value. Oops, that is not spelt correctly. Let's actually spell that correctly. So we can go ahead and put that in every blank where we see that. That is where we start. Normally, it's the amount we're starting with. So I'm just going to put it as principal down here. And A is the initial, or we can put principal here. We see it again right here. This is the one new formula. This is the Math 3, yay, formula. But we will definitely talk more about these in class. I just want to make sure we have them all down. So R is the rate. So as you go through each of these formulas, R is the rate. R is the rate. In half-life, we don't see a rate because the rate is 1/2. It's decreasing by a rate of half. The next number you will see is T. So T, or letter, excuse me, is for time. 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 You guys know I love my colors. Time. And funny enough, half-life gives you time in the formula. Okay. So let's pick another fun color. So we'll go with orange. Y, that's what we're using these for most of the time. That didn't switch it. Let's try that again. Sorry. Most of the time, this is the future. Okay, we're just not going to be colorful. But that's the predicted value, or the future value. Exponential equations have a huge real-life implication. All right, so we have our future value. Sometimes you will see that as big A. Notice that's different than the little a. It's capitalized, and half-life is half-life. Okay, so let's go back and now talk about some of these. So important things that I want you to pay attention to is your rate has to be changed to a decimal. If I tell you that something is growing at 12%, 12% means out of 100. So as a decimal, that's 0.12. If I tell you your rate is 5%, then that's 5 out of 100, so 0.05. Make sure you always divide by 100, or some of you remember the trick of moving the decimal 2 to the left. That's very, very important. This 1 here is also important just for you to understand what it's doing. So this one, if we think of out of 100, 1 represents 100% of the value. So that is the original amount. Because if I start with, say, investing $50 and it grows at 12%, I want to make sure that I don't lose my 50. So this 100 plus the 12% means I'm keeping my original $50. So these three you should remember from Math 1. We will practice them still together, but they should not be that hard. If you need to pause this and make sure you write those down, maybe even a little neater than mine. My handwriting in this is just a little messy. Then we have compound interest. So when you compound things, it means that you are doing them over and over again. So we can say that interest is being compounded annually, or sometimes they will say yearly. N is just the number of times per year. So if it says that it is annually, that's once per year. Semi-annually means twice a year. Quarterly, well, think how many quarters are there in $1? 4, or quarters in a basketball game, however you want to think of it. Monthly, there are 12 months in a year, so that would be 12. Daily would be 365. If you want to get technical, it would be 365.25 because of the leap year, but we don't use that one. We actually use that. Okay, compounded continuously. So if you see it's compounded quarterly or yearly or semi-annually or any of these words, then you're using this one. If it says it's compounded continuously, then you are going to use PERT. So notice E is a variable or a letter, but it's not down here, and that's because this E is a button on your calculator. So you might want to just write button on calculator. It actually stands for Euler, who was the one that got credit for coming up with it, but we will dive into this more tomorrow. Make sure you have all of these formulas written down so that you can access them tomorrow. Thanks so much for working hard. Bye, Hawks.